That's just human nature. It's a phrase that's often used to explain everything from violence and jealousy to love. But what is human nature really? What's the thing about us that's unique, that we all have in common, but that separates us from other creatures? From a sociologist's perspective, culture and society are what make us human. These things that we have created also make us who we are. We have to learn the meanings that we give to food, housing, and everything else, and society is our teacher for this. For example, you would be a very different person if you had been born in 14th century Japan, or into an Aztec peasant family, or into a Norwegian royal court. You would have learned a different language, a different set of everyday skills, and a different set of meanings about how the world works. Also, your sense of who you are would be radically different in every case because of the particular social structures and interactions that you would have had to encounter. So if you are a member of an Aztec peasant family, for example, you would expect to be married to someone that your parents chose for you, probably in your early teens. Girls were actually considered old maids if they were still single at the age of 15 and might have ended up as concubines if they didn't find a husband by that early age. So if it's culture and society that make us human, what role does our genetic makeup play? Aren't we born with certain instincts? These are questions that are posed in what's often called the nature versus nurture debate. Those taking the nurture side, which are often sociobiologists, some psychologists, others that are in the natural sciences, they argue that behavioral traits can be explained by genetics. Those taking the nurture side, sociologists and others in the social sciences, argue that human behavior is learned and shaped through social interactions. So which of these arguments is right? Well, both are right. You don't have to look too far to see that genetics or nature plays a role in who we are. For example, research shows that high levels of testosterone contribute to stereotypically masculine traits such as aggressiveness and competitiveness. However, it's also true that facing a competitive challenge, like a baseball game, causes testosterone levels to rise. So is it the hormone that makes us competitive, or is it the competition that stimulates hormone production? An additional example involves a study of moral and social development in people with brain injuries. Stephen Anderson and colleagues actually studied patients whose prefrontal cortex had been damaged. Those who had received the injury as infants struggled with moral and social reasoning, finding it difficult or impossible to puzzle out questions like, is it acceptable for a man to steal the drug needed to save his wife's life if he can't afford to pay for it? People who received the same injury as adults, however, were able to deal with such issues. So Anderson and his research team hypothesized that there is a crucial period in brain development when people acquire the capacity for moral reasoning. In other words, nature provides a biological window through which social and moral development occurs. The point is, there's a complex relationship between nature and nurture. Neither one alone is sufficient to explain what makes us human. Certainly, heredity gives us basic potential, but it's primarily our social environment that determines whether we will realize or fall short of that potential. We are subject to social influences from the moment we're born, and even before, and these influences only increase over the years. In part because of the influence of social contact happens so gradually and to some extent unconsciously, so we don't really notice what or how we're learning. We often speak of socializing with our friends, yet the idea of socializing is only a part of what sociologists mean by socialization. Socialization is actually a twofold process. It includes the process by which a society, culture, or group teaches individuals to become functioning members, and it's also the process by which individuals learn and internalize the values and norms of the group. Socialization then works on both an individual and a social level. We learn our society's way of life, and we make it our own. Socialization accomplishes two main goals. First, it teaches members the skills necessary to satisfy basic human needs and to defend themselves against danger, thus ensuring that society itself will continue to exist. Second, socialization teaches individuals the norms, values, and beliefs that are associated with their culture and provides ways to ensure that members will adhere to this shared way of life. We can appreciate how important socialization is when we see what happens to people who are deprived of social contact. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to look at the importance of cases of feral children. When infants are born, they exhibit almost none of the learned behaviors that characterize human beings. Even their instincts for food or shelter or self-preservation are barely recognizable and almost impossible for them to act on alone. Babies do have innate capacities, but can fully develop as human beings only through contact with others. And there are several startling cases that demonstrate this. Though rare, these cases give social scientists the chance to study the effects of social isolation and to better understand the relationship between human development and socialization. One well-known modern case involves a child named Jeannie, which is a pseudonym, who was discovered by Child Welfare Services in 1970. At the time she was found, she was 13 and had been living with her family in Arcadia, California, where she had been severely neglected and abused. The authorities were shocked to find that the young girl had not developed like a normal child. Since infancy, Jeannie's father had kept her locked in a small room where she was often tied to a potty chair or crib, and she was deprived of practically all human interaction. And we're actually going to watch a video about Jeannie later on this week. And unfortunately, Jeannie was not the last child to be raised in social isolation. And we're going to read about 2 others tomorrow. Each case confirms, though, that the effects of extreme social isolation are devastating and tragic. It's only through contact with others that people develop the qualities we consider natural and normal in a human being. The socialization process begins in infancy and is especially productive once a child begins to understand and use language. But socialization is not complete at that point. It's a lifelong process that continues to shape us through experiences such as school, work, marriage, and parenthood, as we will see as we go on into the next sections.